session, we'll be talking about mass contract upload. There will be a walkthrough, and so mass contract upload is used to import multiple mass lease agreement or contract. And for example, if we have like 200 contracts that we need to enter into the system, then we can just fill up an Excel template and import them instead of going to the UI and creating contract one by one. This is a very effective, efficient tool. And
Pratibha, sorry to interrupt. Maybe you can switch to sharing your screen.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Yes.
No worries. All right. We can see your screen, so yes, go on.
So, yes. And one thing that we need to note is the system can help with your configuration validation. Non-mandatory fields will be checked by the user, just like how we do with the financial terms and conditions. So let's go to the system. And from the main menu, we can go to import export information, and we have to select mass import MLA and contract. And here we need to enter a staging area. We can select the system into which the contracts are being uploaded. And my import type is, it can either be master agreement or contract. So for now, I'm selecting contract. And I'm naming the staging area. And submit. Now I can select that staging area, upload file, and I can download a template here. This is the template. We have around 12 tabs, and all the red ones are mandatory, and the grayed ones are non-mandatory tabs. So we have the introduction, and we have the revision history of the template, and our first tab is contract. We can see we already have these data. These are just for examples, and we can delete them. So we have the contract ID. We need to assign an ID here. We can use something that is different to the ranges that is set in the backend. Or if you're using a similar format, we need to go to the manager page and edit the last generated number. So for now, I'm using something that is unique.
Sorry, Pratibha, can I ask you to maybe increase a little bit the zoom? So, okay, that's perfect. Thank you.
So for contract ID, I'm assigning a contract, and for this session, I'm just uploading 2 contracts. So I have, let's say, and with our 2. And the contract display ID, it can be the same ID, copying and pasting that. And MLA ID, it is a valid activated master lease agreement. So for this training, I'm using one of the master agreement that is already in our system and which is already approved. And the year is based on your configuration, and we can maybe keep the contract start year. So let's say 2022. And I can name it over here. So all the red ones, all the columns with red headings, those are mandatory, and these are not mandatory fields. So external contract, we can include IDs that are from other application, for example, SAP. But this is not mandatory, so I'm leaving it as such. I can give a description of this contract. So I can copy the name and the lease type ID. It is based on your configuration. So as per my configuration, I want my contract to be lease contract fixed. So my lease type ID is 01. And I have the contract category ID, amendment date. Amendment date are the ones if we have any event, this will be populated. And the currency ID. Let's say my contract is Canadian dollar. And my principal position, again, based on my backend detail, my principal position, I have 01 lessee. So keeping it as 01. This is not a mandatory field. And we can select the form of lease ID, joint venture lease type. Again, it's all based on your configuration, and you can fill it up if required. Lease area ID, lease business ID, and company ID, these are mandatory fields. And lease area may have several business units defined, which in turn may be linked to multiple companies. And lease departments are defined for each company and may have multiple lease groups. So we need to make sure we fill in the valid combination based on your configuration. So let's say my lease area ID and lease business unit ID and company ID. Again, based on the configuration, I'm selecting 0001 for North America, and my lease business unit, I can select something from here. And I have the company ID as well. So I'm selecting these three combinations. And lease department ID. Yes, but
Sorry, Pratibha, it's me interrupting you. I just wanted to add that Pratibha is going back and forth to what we have in our internal system for demo purposes and the configuration we have. It's very important that as you populate this field, you are referring to your own configuration, to your own structure, and to the relationship that are creating between companies and business units, for example, and among all these items and structure. So this is the reason why Pratibha is going back and forth between the documentation. But please keep in mind that this is something that you always need to refer to.
thank you, Catalina. And now we have the trading partner, group 1, group 2. All these are not mandatory, but you can fill it up based on your configuration and the company policy. Do you have any question? Okay. The contract phase should always be initial, since, for example, when we are creating a contract, before approving them, the contract phase is always initial. So we select that. And the reason code, it's not used at inception. If there is any event, it will be shown over here. Approver, approved date time will be assigned by the system. And ready for lease component, it should always be true. And that's it for this tab. Our first tab is complete. Now we can go to the second tab, lease determination. this depicts this session of the contract creation. So we need to select the answers for different questions. So yeah.
Sorry, Alana has a question.
Yeah, sure.
Hi, if you go back to the contract tab and go over to the right, one of the things or to the left, sorry, all the way to the contract.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things we know is the contract ID and the contract display ID can't be the same. And so what we've done is we have a 12-digit contract ID, and we've added a 13-digit for contracts that we upload. So we add like a 9 right at the end. And it's caused some confusion from the users, but that's why we kind of set just a standard of, adding a 9 or whatever, because this is the one thing where the user's like, well, we don't want to do that because the number is different. But the contract ID will be the 12 digits, but the display ID, what you see on all the screens in SN, will be that 13 digit. And that's how we're getting by it. I didn't know how you guys are getting by, or if anyone else has an idea how they're getting by using that.
Well, we can have the contract ID and contract display ID as same.
Okay, we always got an error. Maybe that's changed or updated, so I'll have to try that. But yeah, what we've been doing is just adding a 13-digit.
So Alana, maybe I can add here because Pratibha is using an ID that it's outside the configured range. And when you're using a
Okay.
different range, then the ID and display ID can be the same. But what I assume is that in your case, you are using the same range as the configured one. So then the display ID has to be different. And we do present and in the guide for contract uploads there are about 3 options that you can use. We do recommend the one where you're using a different numbering range than the one that you have in your configuration, because in that way you use the same ID and display ID the same. But it's really like we've seen all the situations, so it's really up to each case.
Yeah, because our auditors require us to use the range, right? So that everything has the next thing. So maybe I can get approval for them to move and have an off range for those that we upload and then a regular range for those that we don't. So that might work. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. So that there is also what Pratibha was mentioning at the beginning. You can also use the same contract ID, display ID when you're using range, but then you need to manipulate range in the backend, which I don't know if it's better or worse. So it's really something to be seen.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's interesting. Thanks.
You're welcome.
So back to lease determination. First line is an example, so I'm deleting them. And I'm copying the contract ID from here. And we have various combinations here. And to get lease contract fixed, I need this combination. So I'm using that over here. And now to contract partner. Again, we have an example. I'm deleting them. And I'm selecting copying the contract ID from the previous tab. And I'm pasting it under contract ID. And for contract partner ID, we need a unique ID. So usually I just copy the contract ID and add a alphabet to it. And the partner ID and partner role are based on your configuration. So if you go to the back end, you can see the partner role. For lesser, it's 10. And I have the different partner IDs over here, lesser. And for now, I'm selecting one of them. So going back to the template, I'm pasting the partner ID and partner role. Now, partner contact, it's not a mandatory field, but you can enter the partner vendor details over here. So I'm deleting the examples, but for now I'm leaving this empty. Now base the user notification, this this is based on this area of the contract creation. So based on our configuration, we need to have 4 roles for me to continue to the next step. So I'm copying the same user for both contract and having a unique ID for each of them. So I'm selecting the contract ID, the first one, then pasting it over here. And for the second contract, I need the same details. And I'm pasting the contract ID. And I'm having a unique ID just by adding a alphabet or something like that. So now we have unique ID for each line item. Now we have another mandatory field, accounting. This is where we set down all the details of the contract. For example, the contract rate, if we are using IBR, CPI ID, all those details. So I'm deleting the example again. And I'm copying the contract ID from here. And let's say I need my contract to have like 2% contract rate. So I'm selecting 2. And I'm not using IBR. So I don't have to fill it up, or I can just say false. And CPI ID, based on our configuration, 01 is none, 02 CPI local, and 03 CPI global. So for this session, I'm selecting 01, that is none. And these are mandatory based on what we answer here. If we have 03, that is global, we need to set down the reference date, indexation ID. Or if we have 02 local, we need to set down the current index rate over here. For now, I'm not using a CPI, so it's none. And embedded derivatives, it can either be true or false, but again, it's not mandatory, so I'm leaving it blank. And my compounding frequency, again, based on my configuration, it can be 02 monthly, 01 daily, 04. So I'm selecting 01. Or 02 monthly. And if I want my 360 convention, we can set this as true, or we can leave it blank, or we can say it's false. So for now, I'm saying I need the 360 convention. And again, cost center ID, again, based on our configuration, I have.
Sorry, Pratibha, Viviana also has a question. Can we take it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Hi. Quick question. Instead of copying and pasting from the contract ID tab as an example, If we put formulas, so will it drop the import? Will it fail? Like as an example, just equal to my first initial contract ID, as in this case. Will that work in the import or?
Well, no, the Excel file should not have any formulas in it.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Thank you.
no problem.
But you can use the formulas and then copy paste the value once you are done.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So for cost center, again, going back to my configuration, I have the cost center details over here, and I can select this one. WBS ID, it's not mandatory, and we can use if the cost center ID is not used. And functional area ID, business area, profit center ID, and functional area ID and profit center ID, they are not mandatory, but based on your configuration, and it should have direct relationship with a relation to the chosen cost center. But again, it's not mandatory, so I'm leaving it blank. Network ID, segment ID, track cost, internal order type, internal order ID, all those are not mandatory. Even vendor ID, it says it's mandatory, but we can leave it blank as well. And we have arrears in payment. If we are using it, it can be true. And if you're not, we can leave it blank or say it's false. So for this session, I'm not using arrear payment. So I'm leaving it blank. And that's it for accounting. And we can move on to the lease component now. Again, we have the lease component ID, display ID, and contract ID. So for now, I'm deleting this example and I'm copying my contract ID. And I'm just adding a letter over here to make it unique. And I can copy paste the same for display ID. And I can name them. Let's say and the same description. Quantity, I can say I have 1 and 2, and unit of measure is each for both. And asset class ID. Again, based on a backend detail, I have so based on my backend details, I have this asset class. And I can set down the fair market value or leave it blank. And if you want to, for example, if we have more than 1 unit quantity, we can say it's bulk asset is true. If you want to consider this as a single group, and we can also set down the useful lives, 100. And that's it for lease component. We can move on to the next tab. And this is not a mandatory tab, so we don't have to fill it up if we don't have a carryover balance. So, for example, if For my second contract, I have a carryover balance. I can select a carryover balance ID here. So first, I can copy the lease component ID. And I can have a unique ID over here. I'll just add 2 alphabets. And let's say my carryover balance, the asset gross book value is 1,000. And my accumulated depreciation is 500. And I can have it for both company currency and lease currency. For me, it's the same. So I'm just copying it and pasting it over here. Rest of the columns are not mandatory. We can set down the asset accumulated depreciation value for the current year. And we have extra four fields that may be filled in for contract under IFRS 16 in disconnected or hybrid system. So users may enter carryover balances, impairment information over here. So that's it for carryover balances. Now we have the last mandatory tab for financial terms. This is where we enter the terms and condition of the contract. So I'm deleting the example and I'm copying the lease component ID from here. And I'm creating a unique financial term ID just by adding a letter. And my term type. This is based on my configuration. So my first term is base rent. So I can search for the base rent, and my base rent is configured as 01. I can select that. So 01. And my and the name is base rent. And I can select the lease amount over here, 1,000. And non-lease amount if required, or you can keep it as 0. And amount frequency, again, based on my back-end information. My amount frequency, it can be 00 for one time, 05 for year, 04 for month. So I'm selecting 00. And similarly, my payment frequency, I'm selecting monthly, 01. And I can set my first payment date. Let's say I want it from 1st Jan 2019 to 28. We can select if the payments are made at the end of the month, we can say it's true, but since for me it's the 1st of every month, I don't have to fill it up. And we have guaranteed residual value. If you have a guaranteed residual value, you can fill it up over here. And my terms, I can select the same first day, ROU start date and end date is same as my payment dates. And for the terms and months, usually I use the formula date this, and I'm selecting the first expected start date and end date, and I'm selecting M to see the number of months. And same for the remaining number of days, I can say use the formula. Excuse me. I can use the formula date this, expected start date, contract end date, plus 1. So this is the terms, months and day. And since we can't take formulas, I'm just copying and pasting value. And we have the lesser notification date. Again, it's not mandatory, so I'm leaving it as such. And my category for standard term as per my configuration is 01. And I don't have a lease, non-lease amount, so I don't have to fill this up. And it's early buyout, it's false. Now, if you want more than, let's say for one of my contract, I have around 4 or 5 terms. I want to add supplement for 1 month, let's say incentive, indirect cost, or prepaid rent. I can add few lines over here. And I can copy paste. I can just add some letter and create a unique financial ID for each term. And I'm copy pasting the same lease component ID. And let's say I want incentive, free rent, for example, and I want the free rent to be for 2 months. I can select the term type 50 based on my configuration. And I can say incentive free rent as the name. And since it's free rent, we don't have a lease amount or a non-lease amount. And the payment frequency, I can copy paste from the base rent. And I can select the dates at which the period at which we have the free rent. So let's say February and March of 2022. Again, it's for, we need to see the date. So it's for 2 months and 0 days. And I'm selecting the same first date and first payment date and last payment date. And the category is incentive, so it's 04 based on my configuration. And again, I don't have to fill all other details. Now, the third term I want is, let's say, indirect cost, initial indirect cost. So for that, the term type as per my configuration is 60. And I have the name initial direct cost. And here for initial direct cost, prepaid rent, and all those details, we don't have a lease amount. We have a non-lease amount. So I'm saying my lease amount is 0. My non-lease amount, I paid $1,000. And I'm using the same amount frequency and payment frequency. And I'm selecting the first payment date. And the term and month, I'm setting it as 0. And the same start date and end date. Since it's a non-lease amount, we need to select the category. So for in the initial direct cost, my category is 05 as per my configuration. And since it's a non-lease amount, I need to say what my distribution type is. So I'm distributing based on percentage. I'm using percentage method. I'm selecting that. And we need to set down the percentage, how much percentage we are paying for. Let's say I'm paying this 1,000 for insurance and utilities. We need to give the percentage details over here. And the next one, let's say I already made a prepaid rent. The term type, again, as per my configuration, is 30. And prepaid rent, again, for prepaid rent, we don't have a lease amount. It's a non-lease amount. And I'm saying 1,000. And I'm selecting the same amount frequency. And first payment date, last payment is the same. Terms, months and days are same. ROU start date and end date, again, are same. And the category, as per my configuration, is for prepaid and it's 02. And again, I'm using the same method, percentage. Now, for the second contract, I just have a base rent. So I'm selecting the same base rent details as my first contract. I'm saving that. Now we have to set out the non-lease amount distribution details. Again, it's not a mandatory field, but if we have a non-lease amount over here and we need to distribute it, we need to fill this out. So for non-lease, we have these two. So I'm selecting the financial term ID. And I'm adding one alphabet or letter to make it unique. And based on my backend detail, say I am using that amount for both maintenance and utilities, for example, I can select that. So for my first, for the indirect cost, I paid 500 for utilities. So I'm selecting 50% here. And amount is 0. And based on my configuration, utilities is 06. And the rest, I'm keeping it for insurance. So 01, 50. Had we selected amount here instead of percentage, we can give the amount here instead of percentage. But for now, I selected percentage, so I'm keeping it as percentage. And for the second contract, we don't have any, for the second term, the prepaid rent, let's say I paid that for insurance. I can say it's 01 and my amount is 0 and it's 100% for that particular category. And then we have the contract additional and lease component additional. If we have if these are enabled in your application, we can use this to add extra information at contract and lease component level. For now, it's not mandatory, so I'm deleting the examples here. And our template is complete. We can save this. And we can then go to the application, to the staging area. And I can upload file. I can browse that document. And now I can validate the file. So if there is no issue with the file, the Excel type, or if there is any tab missing, then there will be some error messages. But since we don't have any issues, we can import the file. And once the file is imported, we can get the data validated. At this point, if there is any issues, so over here I have an issue, payment financial term. So I can go back to the template. So it pinpoints where our error is. So my error is with financial term. And for 03 and 04, the payment frequency is invalid. So let me see my payment frequency, financial term. So for 3 and 4. So my payment frequency.
You will need one time, so 00
Yeah, so
for those.
00. Exactly.
Yeah.
So selecting my payment frequency as 00, one time. Okay. And then I can upload it again.
So just to maybe explain a little bit more, Pratibha used a couple of terms like incentive and initial direct cost that you can introduce at the beginning. And some of those terms can only have the frequency one time because you enter them at inception, and they will have the payment date first and last equal to the start of the ROU. But it was a good exercise to see how the system is reacting, how you see the error message, and you can correct it by going to the specific line.
Thank you. And once the data is validated, we can merge the data. Once it's merged, the contract will be available in our landing page. So, and refresh. These are the contract I imported. And that's it from my side. Do anyone have any question? Okay, I'm handing over to you, Ruchika.
Thank you, Pratibha. So I'll be discussing the disclosure report.